Good evening, everyone. Here we are at the City Council study session on February 9th, 2026, 6 p.m. at the City Council chambers at 111 East Maple. Madam Interim City Manager, welcome. And the first item on the agenda is an ordinance that I've sponsored. And just give you some thoughts on this. We may go a different direction on this, but synthetic kratom, also known as 7-OH, has been a problem around the country. People have died because of using it. I'd like us to ban the sale of that, but not ban the sale of kratom as we know it in its natural state. So that's basically the essence of it, but I'd be happy to open it to discussion here amongst my colleagues, or certainly going to do some adjustments to it. This is not the final format, and Mitch, I don't know if Jeremy contacted you and said kind of he was going to hold it till like March 3rd, I think, for the first read, and then
the 16th for the second read, but there may be some other thoughts on this, on the dais about how we proceed. So that's what I had heard from him, but I don't know if you and he had talked about this at all.
I received an email from him this morning. I think you were copied on it. I believe it came to you directly about if you wanted to move forward to it, then they could be added to the March 2nd agenda meeting, which would then mean a second reading on March 16th.
Right, but we may proceed a different angle here. So with that being said, we can open the floor to citizens' request on the issue. We've got Todd Underwood. So Todd, please come, and if I can, I need a motion to allow a non-resident to speak. So if I can have a motion in a second, I'd be grateful.
So moved.
Second. We've got a motion in a second. Mr. Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
there you go. That's all right.
Councilmember Pierce?
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart? Councilmember McCandless?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiley?
Yes.
Councilmember Vaught?
Yes.
Mayor Rowland?
Yes. And it is approved unanimously. So Todd Underwood, if you can come forward and state your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes to talk about this topic. Todd, hold on 1 second. Got to get the microphone hot.
I'll do it again. Todd Underwood here. I live at 809 Southeast Hillside Circle, Blue Springs, Missouri. We own the Examiner building down the street, and that is where we have one of the nation's only FDA-registered manufacturing facilities that manufactures kratom products. We also are fully 21 CFR compliant. We have product liability insurance, and we have filed a new dietary ingredient notification with the Food and Drug Administration on our exact product, and we have the safety data to verify it's safe for human consumption. I did the math today before I came in. We have over 22 million bottles that we sold last year without one single adverse reporting event. So not only have we proven the science of the product prior to market entry, we also have 4 years of existence, and last year alone, 22 million bottles, and we don't have one negative adverse event on the product. We employ right around 80 people between our 2 locations, and we're rapidly growing. And if it would please this council, I'm here to answer any questions or be a resource to help you guys guide this conversation. I fully agree with banning synthetic 7-hydroxy, but I want to warn you, right now banning 7-hydroxy doesn't do it. If anybody remembers Spice from around 12, 15 years ago, what they did is they put Spice on the market, they banned that molecule, and 30 days later they had an additional molecule, and the DEA played whack-a-mole for years until they finally got rid of all of that. They've already done that with this particular product called 7-hydroxy. They've turned it into metrogeny pseudodoxyl, MGM-16, and the list can go on. So however we decide to do this, we have to look at it from the aspect of having language that encompasses any non-natural product, and that would include natural leaf kratom or naturally extracted product that meets the Food and Drug Administration's natural language.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, any
Thank
questions?
you. Anyone, other questions or comments on the council? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm old, so I have That's okay. I'm just-
What's your question, so?
I'm old, so I have seen many drugs come and go, and as I shared with Mr. Underwood, there is no legislation that can keep up with the creativity of a motivated chemist to modify the drug. So I think this is a complicated enough issue that it is worthwhile for us to ask our Board of Health to do a little bit of homework so that we get educated. 7-OH is showing up among youth. It is showing up in poison control centers. The potency is really high in some of these products, and that is causing untold amounts of addiction and complications. For that reason, I think this is a very important piece of legislation, and I appreciate the mayor bringing it forward. I just want to be sure that it is thoughtful in the way that it's worded, and we look at other communities to see what they've done. The other concern I have is that there are multiple pieces of legislation moving at the State House to address this same thing. It would be, I think, appropriate to add into this that we would be consistent with whatever state regulations come down. That way we don't have to modify it later to match up with their legislation, if that sounds like a reasonable addition to this.
Sure, I'm good
Okay.
with that. Anyone else? Other questions or comments?
Doctor, can I add something?
But once the comment period is over,
Okay.
it's over, but we'll certainly have conversations about it going forward.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, that takes us to presentations. We've got the Parks and Recreation Department Master Plan Final Report. I don't want to steal your thunder, so fire away.
All right. Well, I want to get one housekeeping item out of the way first, and our item 3 on historic sites will actually need to be moved. Consultant isn't quite ready to bring that forward to presentation, so I'm not certain of a date, so we will postpone that indefinitely and get it on the quickest study session available once we're confirmed to have the presentation ready to go. But other than that, we'd like to go ahead and bring Leon Younger with Pros Consulting forward to discuss the final findings of the Parks Master Plan. As the council, I'm sure, remembers, the Parks Master Plan began in January of 25, so here we are just over a year later, and going to review the final determinations and findings of that study. So with that, I will apparently give you Director Morris Heidi first.
Leon wants me to introduce him. So I think you all have met with Leon Younger before. I'm Morris Heidi, Director of Parks and Recreation. But again, this evening, we have Leon Younger with Pros Consulting and several other folks here to give a final report on that. The master plan, as you're aware, that's been going for about 13 months now, so started January 2025. And so we're really excited to have them share updates this evening. So I'll turn it over to Leon.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you all again. We're here to share kind of where we are in the final draft and make sure you have all the information you need to move this forward. So just to start with, the master plan really focuses on land, facilities, operations, maintenance, and capital. We talked about this before, but the important thing is we covered all of that in this work. In terms of our strategy, we wanted to make a clear roadmap for stabilizing, modernizing, and elevating the Parks and Recreation system. You all know it's been 15 years since you've been here. And we really wanted something that was realistic and implementable so that you all could recognize the value of the plan and actually work with the staff on implementing it. The plan provides guidance on funding, staffing, and policy decisions for the future.
Mr.
We had
Younger,
3 other consultants that
Please,
worked with
Mr. Younger,
us.
hold on one second.
can you move
Please
the
proceed.
microphone so they can hear you? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry. We had 3 other consulting teams working with us. Confluence is here as well. PJ Novak is going to share his information on the assessment of the parks. We have PGAV also working with us on the historic sites, and ETC Institute, who did all the survey work for us as well. So why does this plan matter now? It's really, Independence has a strong potential, but is limited by aging infrastructure. We talked about this before with you, but The system hasn't had the level of investment really over the last 15, 20 years that you would normally see a city of this size. There's a lot of deferred investment is increasing because of the age and life cycle of your parks and the amenities were in the park. And really community expectations are changing. You're growing, you're going to continue to grow. And as people move into your community, Parks and Recreation does take on an element of expectation. And with that, the park system is really designed to basically support them. So parks should be a safe, welcoming, and well-maintained. The programs need to be accessible, fun, and relevant. And they need to demonstrate visible improvement and provide more consistent and communication and project planning efforts are applied to Parks and Recreation. The goal of programming is to activate the spaces and really make sure that all those spaces are really meeting what the community's needs are, but also energizing your community to the value of parks. I'm going to turn this over to Travis.
Good evening, Council. Travis Strambarger with Pros Consulting. Speaking a little bit about the community engagement, you all will probably recall, as Morris mentioned, we started this a little over a year ago. In total, we engaged over 1,200 people throughout this process through several different methods, including focus groups, one-on-one interviews. We had a social pinpoint website, an online website where the community could go online and provide input. The online survey engaged almost 300 people. And then we did a statistically valid survey, which engaged over 800 households for that piece. And all of that kind of culminated in what we will, here in a few slides, talk about are the priorities for the next 5 years for Parks and Recreation. We're calling those pillars. But essentially, what you see on the slide here is what the residents told us through that engagement piece, that parks should be safe, welcoming, and well-maintained. And the community, wants to see visible improvement over the next 5 years. And so we'll talk about it here in a few minutes, the action plan that we're working with staff on developing to implement the master plan going forward. So essentially the first pillar, as we're calling it, that came from the community engagement as a priority is park asset revitalization and stewardship. And so, it's important for the city to protect the public investment first. There is a considerable amount of deferred maintenance in the park system, and there is a considerable amount of modernization that needs to happen with parks and facilities to meet today's expectations of the community, and do that before expanding the system. So essentially what we're saying is taking care of what you have first, and then once you do that well, the advocacy starts to build towards future facilities. And shifting from reactive repairs to a planned life cycle based reinvestment. And so being more strategic about where you're putting your dollars within that deferred maintenance. We understand that can be pretty overwhelming to staff and officials. And so we're recommending certain areas be focused on first to essentially the quick wins to start tackling those parks and facilities that are a priority to the community. And then prioritizing underutilized spaces for reinvestment. So as PJ will explain, there are certain parks and facilities that are underutilized throughout the park system. And so reimagining how those look in today's independence. How are those going to meet expectations for residents today and 5 to 10 years into the future? So with that, I'm going to hand it off to PJ to talk about the park assessment work and our capital improvement plan.
Good evening, it's PJ Nova with Confluence. I want to talk to you about the existing system and what we have been looking at. General park recommendations across the entire system. The first one is parks, what we call life cycles. So that's equipment and infrastructure. And basically, through NRPA and across the country, really making a plan to look at how things are taken care of from here on out and budgetarily planning for that. For instance, parking and trails and sidewalks, really, they typically have about a 15-year life cycle before they need to start being addressed, so trying to work that into your budgeting. Playgrounds, typically we see 20 years a very maximum with that they've reached the, things have changed, the safety factors have changed, they just need to be replaced. Restrooms, maybe the building doesn't have to be at 20 years, but a lot of times the infrastructure inside is just worn out, and that needs to be addressed. And then also just site furniture, when they're out in the open air, they get worn out after 20 years and just needs to be replaced. So those are things that should be planned out as we go forward. Furniture standards, just taking a look at benches, trash receptacles, grills, lighting, drinking fountains, security lighting, just making a look at, at a plan to make sure that they're being refurbished or they're being replaced on an as-needed basis with that. Also, there's some ADA standards that some of the parks don't have, and as we move forward, we want to recommend making improvements, especially to sidewalks, trail materials, and widths. Just getting into the parks is a high priority, and then creating signage standards. So maybe refurbishing some of the existing signs, but also take a look at some color additives to try to get the parks a little more identifiable within the system. Priority items to address what we call these sustainable projects, and you'll notice, I think you saw a prior one where you're going to see the numbers are different here. We've worked with the staff over the last 10 days to take a look at where we're putting sustainable project and where we're putting the next level. So the numbers are equally all the same, but baseline projects. So these are upkeep projects. We're taking a look at surfacing within the parks, taking a look at trails and improving those, playgrounds and all the amenities without those. So that's really basically upkeep and renovations of what you had. So that's the existing system. So we're saying that's, in today's dollars, that's about a $10 million to go across the entire system, a $10 million budget issue on there. Let's go sustainable projects, for example, walkways and basketball courts. You can see they're aging, just need replaced. There's cracks. They're just, really need some maintenance issues addressed. Playground structures that are just at the point at which, as you can see in that picture, that's very old, old what we call post and deck playgrounds, and you look at what's new and what's safety out there now is totally different. And then just aging ball diamonds. You got bleachers and fencing. You have bleachers that don't meet the current standard. If it's 2 levels high, it really needs to have a rail around it. With those, just taking those things, kind of, if you will, those easy wins to just try to spruce things up with that. Expanded services. So this is really improving what we have. It's really what the residents have been desiring, to add parks. And so what we heard from the residents, we're also applying national park standards. So this goes for fields, additional courts. Maybe you've got tennis courts that really aren't being used. Do they need to be retrofitted into pickleball courts, things like that. And then also shelters, making sure there's enough shelters. There's one thing we always hear in these plans is shelters and shade in parks is a high priority. So we're saying those renovations and amenities and improvements in the infrastructure to expand above what we have today is totaling about almost $9 million with that. And then the final priority, as you can see here, this outdoor workout equipment with artificial turf surfacing is something that can be improvements to the splash pads. So those are improvements that can be made that really respond to what we heard from the public. And then visionary project, developing new opportunities to become a regional draw and really transformative projects. So we really see about 4 opportunities out there: recreation center, aquatics facility, the sports complex, and then more splash pads and playgrounds throughout the city. These amenities all total could be upwards of $88 million with that, because those are large infrastructure projects with there. A couple of locations that might be an opportunity, obviously the IAC with that and transforming that. I think we looked at that about a year ago with you. And then also the church property, what the opportunities there that could bring needs in the community could be addressed with that property.
So the second big area, key area, or pillar 2, we took a look at recreation programs. And so again, using the community engagement piece to understand what programs are most important to households within the community, and where the community feels their needs are underserved with recreation programs. And so that helped establish core program areas of focus. And so the recommended core program areas include aquatics, arts and culture, active adults or programming for older adults and seniors, fitness and wellness, community and special events, nature education and outdoor adventure, youth and family out-of-school enrichment, and sports programming. And so we should note that the youth out-of-school programming stood out to us as a major need for Independence to focus on over the next 5 years. with the change in the school schedule, there were a lot of families that talked to us through the engagement process on how childcare is a need in this community, and Parks and Recreation can kind of pick up that slack. In addition, we looked at similar providers throughout the community and understand that there are a limited number of childcare options within the community, especially that can meet the needs of growing school-aged children. And so those could be out-of-school camps during spring, fall, winter, summer break, or after-school type programming that Independence could help address underserved needs or gaps within the community. That similar provider analysis also allowed for us to take a look at maybe where recreation opportunities are more saturated. And so with limited funding, we recommend that Independence focus on those under-met needs instead of doing something that maybe someone else from the private sector or nonprofit sector is doing pretty well. There might be partnership opportunities there, but we want to make sure we're avoiding duplicating services offered by those other sectors.
Did you look at, in your report, does it indicate what those duplication services are? I haven't got all the way through the report yet. I just got it today, and so I haven't got completely through the 400 and some odd pages. So.
Yeah, we know it's pretty lengthy. So we did do a high-level similar provider analysis, and we did that based on the core program areas. So we looked, for instance, fitness and wellness. We asked staff to send us who they viewed as maybe similar providers in that space, and we took a look at the types of programs they're offering. And fitness and wellness is a good example in that the older adult demographic is underserved with fitness and wellness in this community, whereas some of the more individualized or more advanced fitness classes may be served by the private sector or your boutique fitness locations, but there definitely is an opportunity for Independence Parks and Recreation to address those gaps within fitness and wellness program. And then we did that for each other core program area as well.
Okay.
Thanks for the question. So the third major pillar that came through the community engagement process and discussion with officials and staff is connectivity, access, and safe public spaces. So the goal here is to create welcoming destinations. And when you activate parks in that manner, it helps eliminate some or all of the nefarious activity that may be occurring in those parks. And you notice the community starts to value those spaces more and advocate for those spaces, and it's a continuous positive cycle. And so we are recommending to prioritize investments in underserved neighborhoods. There is underserved areas, particularly on the east side of Independence, but we also did a level of service analysis to look at where maybe some of the areas are too saturated with parks or trails or facilities. And again, taking a look at today and tomorrow's Independence as opposed to what it was 15 years ago when the plan was last done. The community has grown in its footprint and population-wise, and there are needs for different types of parks in other areas of town. And so these next few slides give you an idea of what we looked at with the level of service analysis. Again, it's to help support strategic investment in future parks, facilities, and amenities, and to help Independence make a decision on what areas may be overserved with certain facilities, and how do you spread that out across the community as the community demographics and population and even footprint continues to shift. And so this one you see on your screen is for community parks. It has the service radius that you'll notice the green circles are based on the size of the park and the type of amenities it has in it. So the bigger the park, the more amenities, the bigger service radius it has. You'll also see in the plan all of these maps. I believe there's a total of 19 or 20 of these maps that assess the parks, the trails, and specific facilities and amenities. And we go through this same exercise, but these maps provide a good visual on where the community is served by specific parks, facilities, and amenities, and where they may not be. We also, through the level of service analysis, assess the current service level per 1,000 people with Independence population, and there's a formula that churned out a recommended standard per 1,000 people for specific park acreage, trail miles, and types of facilities and amenities. So this next map is similar, but a little bit different. We also assess 10-minute walk to parks. And so the 10-minute walk is a national initiative that came out through the Trust for Public Land as a benchmark for communities to assess connectivity and access to parks through other means other than vehicles. And so this gives you a glimpse of the 10-minute walk radius to all of Independence's parks. And while there may be several parks in one area, I think you can still notice that there are some access issues in those areas to those neighborhood, community, or regional parks. And so this just again provides a good benchmark and a visual on how the parks, the overall park system could be better connected. So we did the same exercise for paved trails, and so you can kind of see, which parks have paved trails either inside the park or whether it may be a linear, what we call a linear park, or a trail outside of parks that connects other properties together.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So Mid-America Regional Council spent a lot of time and effort mapping out Metro Green, which was to be a connected set of trails and public spaces. Does your plan mesh with that at all, or those are completely independent thoughts?
So I believe ours is mostly independent from that.
Okay, thank you.
Same exercise for rectangular fields. You can see there that the Independence Athletic Complex takes up the majority of the service area. That's what we deem more of a regional type park, and so it has a bigger service radius and even stretches to outside the community. And then lastly, playgrounds. And again, there's several other maps in the actual plan. We just wanted to provide a glimpse at some examples for facilities, parks, and trails. And so with that, I will hand it off to Leon for the Pillar 4.
Thank you. So our fourth pillar is the organizational capacity and operational excellence, aligning the resources with expectations of the public. So first of all, modernize internal systems, policies, and staffing. That really, everything in Parks and Recreation is built around a set of standards. And those standards, like any other, police and fire has standards, so does Park Systems. It's just that the intent is where are you within that process, and how can the department work towards managing to that level of capacity and deliver on what the community expects. Shift from informal practice to standardized operations, especially as applies to programming, facility management, maintenance, just the entire policy management, funding as an example, and then build more core services that really focus on active adults, aquatics, arts and culture, community and special events, fitness and wellness, nature education, outdoor adventure, sports, youth and family, out of school enrichment. Those are the core services that your community desires from this system. Pillar 5 is economic vitality, financial sustainability, and strategic investment. The whole goal here is responsible growth and long-term sustainability. Manage the park and recreation with a business-minded framework. Everything costs money. How do you manage and how efficient you are is the goal, and all of our work was built around maximizing the efficiency of the system, as well as how we can incorporate other earned income opportunities to help manage the system forward. And we've outlined a series of opportunities that the plan could address. It's up to the staff and the council working forward to whether you want to incorporate those into your system, clearly communicate the value and cost of service to the public so people understand that it's not free isn't just free. There's a cost associated with everything that you're providing. And the important thing is the recognition for the value that the public receives. Reinvest in portions of the system that really support the economic development of the city. I mean, I know you're all over it right now with other types of economic development. Our encouragement to you is make parks a part of the economic plan, and then align park improvements with future redevelopment efforts as well, especially in key areas where the amenities don't match up with where the population is. Then funding reality, revitalization requires investment, and this plan cannot be implemented without increased funding. Last time I talked to you about that, said that the park system's funding was around 2% of the total city's budget. Continued underinvestment limits progress and increases risk. Really, where you take the system so far down, it's so hard to rebuild it. And then strategic reinvestment minimizes long-term costs, just as PJ was talking about, constantly looking at the life cycle of all of these amenities. Everything has a life cycle, and parks are not any different, but keeping up with that. And then funding decisions should be phased and deliberate and really strategic as you move forward. Fifth year, 5-year implementation. I know it's been 15 since you did it, but my encouragement is that you do it every 5 years. It tells a real story about your system, and it also helps the council to measure how effectively the council and the park system is working together. So part of that is focusing on performance metrics that are really tied to each of these pillars. So when the park system brings their budget, they're also giving you how well they're delivering on the outcomes of their work and meeting your expectations as well as the public's. Transparent communication on funding and really what are they capable of. Listen, I've been a practitioner for 20 years. I understand when you're sitting in Morris's seat, you want to tell everybody everything's perfect, but it's not. The intent is you want to really tell the story correctly. And then actively manage the plan. Part of our work here was to give them a series of outcomes that are measurable so that they really can stay focused on the action plan and they're not reacting, they're proactive in their work. And then regularly reporting back to their progress to all of you and the Park Commission. And then monitor public use and satisfaction, so how well the public is receiving the work that's being done. And then we broke the plan into short-term strategies, which are establish foundation policies, planning, long-term enhancements, introduce priority programs and services, midterm, really scaling the priority of programs and public demand, reinvesting in facilities, continued public engagement, make sure that all of the elements are set up in a data-driven process, and then the long terms are 5 years plus, but really build it in as part of the overall city's thinking as you move forward and continue to grow in the city's efforts to support the people who live here and people who plan on living here. So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Any questions for anyone? Please proceed.
I'm like Councilmember Fierce. I haven't been able to chew through this whole thing, but I did get some early questions about pickleball capacity and whether some of the existing courts might change hands or whether we'll be expanding those. It seems to be one of the growing areas of interest in the city. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, sports courts are popular everywhere, including pickleball. And everybody, when you have back in the 90s, tennis was growing like crazy, and everybody couldn't build enough tennis courts. And then people caught up, and then tennis kind of balanced it out. Same thing happened in softball fields. Same thing's going on right now in pickleball. The same process is there. The thing about pickleball, it has a much wider age segment appeal than what a lot of other sports do, because it's going to be an Olympic sport in 2 years. And so you got kids playing it as well as older adults. And so consequently, when you have that wide of age segment appeal, you're going to get more and more pressure to do more and more type of sport courts like pickleball.
So is your recommendation that we have enough, that we should expand? No. Okay.
You don't have enough. Go ahead.
Maybe just a question in that regard, and this may be for either Morris or Lisa, but so I got a question just over the weekend that someone had heard that we were going to close the Blackburn pickleball courts. And then I didn't think I'd heard anything about that. I just wanted to make sure that, because if that's the only outdoor pickleball courts we have, that doesn't seem to be, so I just wanted to maybe, if we could, put that to rest or find out if there's any truth to that.
So I don't want to speak for the consultants, but one of, and I don't know if PJ wants to speak to this, but one of the recommendations is to invest in city-owned property first, and with Blackburn being school district property. So they are recommending looking at those going back to the school district, and we would not invest our limited sales tax dollars in those facilities. Doesn't mean they're recommending pickleball go away. We would have to obviously add courts before that happens.
So we would do something else before that.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of these recommendations are transitional in nature. It's going to be some time. Obviously, the funding has to be in place before some of these changes can take place. But yeah, that is a recommendation.
All right,
so.
thank you. Didn't want to take us too far off track, but since you were talking about pickleball,
That's a good
I thought
question.
I'd raise it.
Good question.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the level of service analysis lays out the specific needs for facilities and amenities like pickleball. So it assesses, as I mentioned earlier, the current level of service with the current pickleball courts, but based on population projections, it has a recommended service level for pickleball courts and basketball courts and all of the other types of amenities.
Playgrounds, everything.
And that formula is grounded in, population projections. And so it assigns a certain number of pickleball courts per 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 people, and allows for you to grow commensurate to that recommended level of service.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please proceed.
thank you. Leon, thank you for all the work that you put in this. That's a long time, 483 pages, plowing through that myself. But it's very important as we're strategizing and we're looking to the future of what our park system would look like to keep and attract young families here within the city. When the city proposed and our citizens voted for our sales tax 20 years ago, the buying power compared to then and now is drastically different.
Right.
So we've lost quite a bit of buying power just through the just natural forces of economics that has really limited that. I believe the city is the council, we're very much in tune to want to get our park system back to where they need to be so we can offer those amenities, doing different tours and different engagements with other cities, leadership exchanges. There has been a lot put into park systems specifically to attract young families. With that said, I believe our citizens are on the cusp of working with us. We almost passed the bond tax. In fact, I believe you were putting your information together as we were working through that,
Right.
and we just barely missed that, the
Right.
historic tax and the
90
athletic field
votes.
tax, which
90 votes.
yeah, I mean, we were almost there, which would have brought the athletic complex up to a standard that would have been a good regional draw, not only to our citizens, but our constituents, but also to youth sports and youth tourism that I think we really missed out on. But I think the timing's getting there to have those engagements and have that conversation back again. Our next presentation is our mid-year financial update, so it kind of dovetails nicely into where we're at financially. But I want to say thank you to your team for helping us put this together as we navigate this, and Morris and your team for helping out and putting this together.
The staff has been terrific to work with, as well as the leadership in the city. And I think everybody recognizes great cities have great park systems. And the challenge is trying to help you continue to be a great city, but do everything you can to recognize the value of parks and what it means. I can tell you, I seriously have worked well over 1,500 park systems. You can feel a great city when you drive into it, just how well they take care of their parks. You can tell. And so I just encourage you to really adopt this plan because your citizens need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please proceed.
So I too want to thank you for the work done on this. It's a significant endeavor, I know, and we appreciate it. it is, critically important that we pay attention to this. I fully agree with that. The question I really have is, as we digest this and then hopefully move forward with adopting it as a plan going forward, how is the best way to, because we'll have, as we work through the 483 pages, we'll have questions. Do you want us to, what's the best way to do that? Come to you directly, go to Morris first, go to Lisa first? What would you all prefer in that regard?
Well, I think, we've talked to Morris about continuing to help you and support you along the way. Just because we do a plan doesn't mean we leave the city. We want to see the city as successful as possible, and we've offered up the opportunity to continue to help them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I too want to thank you, Mr. Younger, for you and your consulting firm, and also for all the staff that worked really hard to make this happen. So thank you for all of your work and getting us to this place. And as you well know, and you talked about it, the constraint is money, and that's our constraint.
Well, we'll help you get there.
Absolutely. So, but thank you very much for all of your help.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Madam Interim City Manager, the second item on the agenda is mid-year financial update.
Yes, and that will be presented by our budget manager, Alex Morgan. And as she makes her way forward, this is just as a reminder to the council, this is our mid-year review. We do this annually. Our fiscal year starts obviously July 1st, so at the end of December, we're halfway through. So just while we're in the midst of actively budgeting for our next fiscal year, it's a good time to review where we are and are halfway through our current one and look at those projections and how we're tracking as we budget. So Alex, take it away.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council, members of the public. My name is Alex Morgan. I am the budget manager for the city. And as Lisa said this evening, I'll be presenting to you the mid-year financial update. And I do agree, Councilmember Perkins, that presentation dovetails very nicely for what it's worth. I also agree with Parks' assessment of where their budget sits in comparison to other cities and the need for more investment when we have the resources to do so. So just a little sidebar there. For the mid-year financial update, I'll be going through kind of high level 3 different things. So first, we'll do kind of a general financial update, kind of a temperature check of a couple different financial indicators for the city. Then we'll take a deeper dive into the fund balance and where it sits currently for fiscal year 25-26, and then where we're projecting it to be. And then I'd like to spend some time this evening talking to you a little bit more in depth about budget pressures, some that we face constantly and some that are very acute this particular year. So first, let me just make sure I've got there we go, slides. Okay. So to start with, and I'm going to touch on each of these things a little bit more in depth, but before I do that, just kind of a general highlight, general temperature check, a couple things that we look for, especially at mid-year, is what our sales tax is doing, what our use tax is doing. I like to look at building permit activity. That's not always a one-for-one for financials, but it's a good sense of kind of how the community feels, what's going on in your community. And then on the flip side, we look at expenditures. So, and again, we'll go through especially these first 2 things more in depth, but right now, year over year, sales tax growth remains flat. There's even been some shrinkage, unfortunately. And on a more positive note, use tax growth has remained steady, around 6 to 7%. And we've had a really strong start to the year for building permit activity. The revenue receipts for that are actually just about $200,000 or $200,000 off what we budgeted for the entire year, so roughly 85% of the total receipts for the year, which is really good. And so that's a smaller source of revenue, but again, just kind of a good check for the community. Mayor, did you have a question? Sorry.
And if you can, just explain use tax for people who don't know that, because I know the
Yes.
name doesn't really represent.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Yes, so use tax is the tax that we have on the online retail. So Independence has a large retail brick and mortar, and then we have an online sale. So there's 2 different taxes for any members of the public who may not be familiar. The sales tax usually represents about $20 million worth of revenue. Use tax is around $2 million or so. So very different in terms of scale, but both important and good financial indicators. And before we get into those a little bit more in depth, just kind of a refresher, and especially for members of the public who may be less familiar with the budget. So the City of Independence has roughly a $454 million budget, and that's not just the general fund, that's everything, that's IPL, that's all our capital. The general fund sits at about $84.8 million. And just as a reminder, it's kind of crazy how a year flies, but around this time last year, we were facing down a $6.3 million shortfall in the general fund. We were able to right-size that through a series of corrective measures, one of which involved moving police and fire into their own individual sales tax funds, so Fund 67 and Fund 17 respectively. Even after that, we still had a shortfall that we had to cover, and so a series of choices were made there to correct that. And so I think that's an important reminder for folks to know where we have had to dig ourselves out of and correct, not because of poor decisions, but because of the difference in where we have revenue and expenditures. And so that's why I'm going to talk more this evening about the budget pressures that the city faces. So that's just a quick recap there for budget. On a positive note, one thing that we were able to do was provide a 3.25% increase for non-represented employees. Employees who are represented and have collective bargaining agreements also received their increases, and we were able to approve about $500,000 worth of budget packages in the general fund as well. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more into the use tax and sales tax, but I just wanted to put up generally on the screen for a second the general fund revenues, because I think what this chart shows you is interesting. In the past couple of years, once we get past 21, 22, there's not a ton of fluctuation. There's a little bit of fluctuation back and forth, but roughly we stay kind of steady. There's not a lot of growth. There's some shrinkage. Some places you have shrinkage, like in taxes, for instance, and then the pilots grow, and so there's an offset. But I think the key thing to take away here is we stay about the same. The revenues are not increasing at a significant rate, and as I'll beat a dead horse here, but the expenditures do, unfortunately. Before we get into that, I think it's important to kind of set tone here, and this is something that we like to do during the mid-year update, is to talk briefly about the state of Missouri and their economic forecast. This is something that they publish in their budget document. And the reason that we do this is because for Independence, there's typically a lot of correlation between the trends and the rates that we see here as compared to statewide, so it's kind of a good additional temperature check here. But Missouri's economy saw moderating growth during 2025. Employment levels did decrease slightly. The slowdown in labor market is still expected in 2026 and 2027. Missouri's economy is largely expected to follow national economic trends through 2027. But one thing that I find really interesting is that the state themselves have said that revenue forecasting is challenging under the best of circumstances, and that their state office is finding it even more difficult following national and state level policy shifts. There's a serious revenue shortfall projected for the state of Missouri that's anticipated in FY27, largely due to the implementation of previously passed tax cuts. The budget surplus for the state of Missouri was at $4.3 billion on June 30th. That is now projected to be at $4.7 million on June 30th, 2027. So I'm just going to repeat that. 4.3 billion, 4.7 million. Some people may be wondering why I'm talking about the state of Missouri when this is the City of Independence mid-year financial update. Again, there's a lot of correlations here between what happens statewide and what happens in the city, but I think particularly this point about the budget surplus at the state is really interesting to me, because as Missouri and the governor make recommendations, especially regarding sales tax, which I'm not going to get into in depth. I know there's already been discussions about that. That has a trickle-down effect. And when the state has to replenish this revenue as their budget surplus dries up, that then has a ripple effect here in terms of what our sales tax looks like, whether that's an increase in different tax services, increasing our base. So all of that ties into our own financial update. Okay, so sales tax. This chart here on the screen shows you the 12-month performance of sales tax here in the City of Independence. There's two different charts on the screen for anybody, or sorry, there's two different lines on the screen for anyone who's looking at this chart. The orange line shows you the year-over-year percent change in CPI. CPI is the Consumer Price Index, or inflation. And then the blue line is the annual growth rate for sales tax in the economy. So you can see here that sales tax holds steady at around 2 to 3%, excuse me, the inflation holds steady at around 2 to 3%. And unfortunately, you see up and down fluctuation in our sales tax, which represents either flat growth or shrinking growth. So what this means is that there's a gap between rising prices and weak growth, which suggests that consumers and businesses may be facing higher costs without stronger spending. This is an example of which the city's budget is not unlike your own personal finances. When prices increase, when you have less money in your pocket, you're typically going to have to cut back somewhere, and that's something that we see, but that's also what we're seeing reflected here in the spending of people within the City of Independence. So the budget implication here again is that as cost pressures continue to increase faster than the underlying economic growth and revenue base, we're going to feel that tension there.
Mr. Mayor?
Please proceed.
Alex, can you go back to that slide?
Yes, ma'am.
So I just don't want people to think that 2 to 3% change in CPI is the same as the inflationary pressure we're feeling on city chemicals and services and asphalt and things like that, because it has not been 2 to 3% in escalation.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
In many cases, it's more than that. This is just an average, and not to get too technical, but CPI is a very specific definition.
Right.
For anyone who's not familiar, it is for a very specific basket of goods that the federal government defines. So our fuel, our supplies don't necessarily fall into that. So this is a national average, but yes, unfortunately for us, you're correct, Councilwoman, that it is frequently higher than this 2 to 3%. Thank you for that clarification. This chart here just shows you a longer look at the retail versus the CPI, and so you can see a pretty different picture in 2021. There's a much higher growth rate. It's outpacing inflation, but as you can see, and we move through time here. Also, just as a reminder to anybody watching, you may be wondering why it's September of 2025. There's usually a lag in this data, so we look a few months back. But you see pretty consistently through 24-25 that inflation is outpacing our growth for sales tax, for brick and mortar specific sales tax. Okay. So we have a similar chart for use tax. This one is more positive. So what we're looking at here for use tax is that there's a peak in 2024, and then after that, youth tax has a pretty steady growth of about 6 to 7%, which is great. That outpaces inflation. And so this is a good contributor to our revenue growth, but unfortunately, the overall impact is smaller than sales tax because, as I said before, sales tax is about $20 million, and then the use tax is $2 million. So good, but it just does not have the proportional impact that the sales tax has. Again, we have similar chart that I just showed you, longer period of time. So here you see that much bigger peak in the 2024, and then it evens out, and we've remained steady, which is good for budgeting purposes. It makes it easier for us to anticipate what we can budget and what we can expect. Okay. All right, so now I'd like to take a deeper dive into the city's fund balance. Right now, where we sit for FY 25-26, revenues are tracking closely with the budgeted amounts at this point in the year. In positive news, some of our revenues do appear to be coming in slightly over, and that's going to be really beneficial because of some of the budgetary pressures that we have faced this year. So we're projecting currently about $84.9 million in revenue for this year. We do have some continued concerns pertaining to Jackson County property taxes and then the state plans for sales tax, as I've mentioned, but those don't have an impact for this year. But when we're looking at the fund balance forecast, I've not factored them in, but I just want to mention it because depending on how things played out, that would be something that would change the way that the fund forecast looks. Okay.
If I can jump in here,
Yes, sir.
Alex, this might be a great point. I know Melissa and I are planning to go to a meeting of all the mayors of Eastern Jackson County on Wednesday, and the discussion there is the impact that the tax credit from the property taxes is going to have on the city, only on our cities, but all the cities in totality. And it looks to be just an absolutely delightful afternoon tea. So it should be just absolutely fun and delightful, and we should just have biscuits and tea and just clink our glasses, and it'll just be delightful. I'm obviously with tongue in cheek there, but some of the mayors are, how shall I say, disturbed, to the least saying, because this has been, now all the rhetoric has been said, and now it is coming to roost where the school districts and the cities are now seeing the impact it's going to make on their budget. And we're pretty lucky. We don't have a tremendous amount of property tax income for our city, but, so we'll see the impact it's going to make for the rest of the folks and what their feelings are. But I thought this would be an appropriate place to put it in here. I hope I didn't jump overboard.
No, sir, I appreciate it. And to your point, even though we don't have perhaps the same property tax revenue base that other people do, as I'm going to get into more, and you'll see here, even small variations can have an outsized impact here. So even if it's not the largest dollar amount on paper, it typically results in hard choices for us, and unfortunately that's just the bottom line. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So to get a little bit more in depth with our fund balance, and so the left-hand column, trying to make sure I'm facing correctly, is going to show you where we had budgeted versus where we're projecting to be at now. So the beginning fund balance is a little bit lower than what we had originally budgeted, and that's not unusual. When we start budgeting, we are looking at fund balance in February, March, so not surprising that it changes, but it did decrease from what we had originally hoped. We are looking at a little bit of higher revenue, about $100,000, give or take, in additional revenue, possibly some additional revenue that's not factored in here coming in as well this year. But the total expenses are $86.3 million. So that is over what we budgeted, and that's due to some unexpected expenditures that we could not budget for this year that we've had to correct and course correct here. So what this means, if this projection is correct, and of course it's subject to change, it's an estimate at this point, but we would be looking at a $1.37 million fund balance reduction. Where that would put us is an unassigned fund balance of $13.69 million, which is just above our fund balance policy of 16% revenue by the slimmest of margins. It's about $100,000 above where we need to do. And so I'm going to pause here for a second to talk through what that means for anybody who's not familiar. So when I say our fund balance policy, the city has a financial policy that's based on guidelines from the Government Finance Association. This is national guidelines of having 16% of our revenue in reserves that we can use when we need it. So the big thing to understand here is that this money is being pulled from where it needs to. First and foremost, we have savings. That's great. The downside is when you draw it down to that balance, you then have to prioritize putting it back. And when you already have slim margins going into the next budget year, it means hard choices because we don't want to leave it right at that margin. We want that money there when we need it. So once again, it just sets us up for some difficult choices. But I do want to reiterate to everyone that this is why we have that policy to help us when these things happen. So it's just like your personal savings account. You don't really want to touch it, but that's what it's there for. And so kind of mixed bag here, but I just want to remind everybody that ultimately it's a good thing that we have fund balance to take from. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
Sorry.
I'll be right back.
Can you explain why we want 16% in our bank account, why that's important in case what happens? Can you talk about that?
Yes, and that's a great question. So the 16% threshold is based on a city's ability to operate kind of worst case scenario. And I apologize, Councilwoman, you put me on the spot and I forget exactly how many weeks or months it's supposed to keep you going. But the idea is worst case scenario, you have this much money, it would keep you going for X amount of time until you were able to right the ship. And that's an extreme scenario, but that's why it has the 16% threshold. More generally, it's there for exactly this purpose. A budget is a plan. We don't know every dollar sometimes we try first to correct within the budget, but when that's not possible, it's just like your own savings account that you go to rather than, disrupting whatever's going on in your life, essentially. Councilmember Canlis, did you also have a question?
No, I was just thinking of examples. There have been multiple towns that have gotten hit by tornadoes or had flooding. COVID is a painful example of chaos inside of your tax base. So these are the sorts of things that you are planning for when you keep a reserve balance.
Yes. And I would say too, because there can be a lot of conversation around fund balance and it shouldn't get too high. And people get criticized when fund balance gets too high. Ours is certainly not at that threshold, for anyone who's wondering. I'd like to see it increase. But yes, there can be really catastrophic things. And so the extreme example of keeping your government running in a crisis is extreme, but it's certainly not unheard of, to your point of, very readily things come to mind that you could use it for. Absolutely.
Alex, I just might add to that in that, for the average household, most people keep some sort of an emergency fund in place. And so for as a financial planner, what we generally suggest is 3 to 6 months. Well, that's not exactly true with what you do on a fund balance scenario like this, but it's somewhat similar, and people should be able to understand that you need to have some funds in reserve for those unexpected things that happen in life, and cities go through that same kind of thing. So it's essentially an emergency fund that needs to be there for the worst case scenario or bad things that happen.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think comparing it to your own personal emergency fund is a perfect example. You budget for things in your daily life, your mortgage, your rent, your groceries. If you, like me, went down into your basement 6 weeks ago and saw water and then heard the quote the plumber gave to you, that could be 4 times your mortgage. That's hard to come up with in a month if you don't already have it. And so we put money aside specifically for those kind of services. And yes, it was 4 times my mortgage, unfortunately. So this next chart is a forecast of the general fund fund balance. And I want to talk in depth about this. I apologize that it's a little bit hard for everybody to see on the screen, so I'll kind of try to talk you through some key points here. So first, when we set up a forecast, I like to talk about the assumptions we use in our model, right? So the model is how we estimate this out. There's a series of assumptions that we use to decide we're going to increase this number, we're going to lower this number. So first and foremost, with this model, we are being very conservative. And so what I mean by that is this forecast has not been made with any kind of significant change to current spending patterns. I'm not, wildly increasing how we spend on, even though I would love to fund parks. I've not given parks an increase, for example, in this model. And I don't have new revenue sources. There's a slight caveat there, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but this is essentially holding to where we're at. And so what that does, when you look at it, you'll see the total revenue that we have coming in is a green line, and our total expenditures are red. When you look at the out years, you see that red is above green. Not by a huge margin, but every year, red is above green. Now, we don't budget that way in practice. When it comes time for council to approve the budget, we make decisions and we get it in line with revenue. But that means budget cuts. That means not providing services or not being able to add things that the community wants. So we don't want to see this red line continue to be above the green line here. A couple of other things that are built into the model. There's a 10% annual health insurance increase. That's been pretty accurate the past couple years. There could be some fluctuation in that going forward, but right now that's a pretty good estimate. There's also a 1% loggers increase annually. We're also reducing some revenue. We continue to see year over year a reduction in our franchise fees. I have not at this point reduced property tax despite the concerns over the Jackson County tax credits, but I will say I'm building in an assumption to the model that there would be some kind of recoupment. If we were unable to do that, then you would see a higher difference between the red and green line. Yes, ma'am.
Just for people listening, franchise fees are actually revenues for us, not things that we pay.
Correct. Yes, correct. that is a revenue that I'm reducing, which again furthers that gap between the green and the red lines. So the one exception to adding in revenue, although I did not add it as revenue, and that's why you're going to see there's a spike here in the preliminary 26-27 fund balance, because I've added an increase in our contingencies, and that is based on potential revenue being realized from the Nebius project. Now, I have not included that in any of the other years out. I've only done it in this first year because I have a higher confidence in that number than I do the years out, but I just wanted people to be able to see. Now, the reason I've done it as an expenditure is because given where our fund balance looks like it's going to end up, and because we probably wouldn't be completely certain about those numbers around budget time, I think what would make the most sense is to budget it as a contingency. And so it's showing as an expenditure, which is why you see that kind of triangular spike there for 26-27 above the green line. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't budget it. And so then you would see that gap decrease. And I apologize, there is a typo on this slide. The last bullet is supposed to say there's roughly $1.4 million in projected funding gap in FY 26-27, not FY 25-26. So if I were to remove that money in contingencies, instead of being that much larger gap that you're seeing there, it would be 1.4 million. But again, a 1.4 million gap that we have to solve probably very shortly. So that's what that looks like in one version of the forecast. The next chart I'm going to show you is our general fund balance in comparison to the fund balance policy, which, as we just talked about, is that 16%. Now, when you look at this chart, you're going to see there's a much rosier outlook for FY 26-27 than the previous slide. That is because I am factoring in potential one-time and/or initial funds, revenue funds, that I did not factor in the other as revenue. This time I am. And so then you can kind of see the difference here. I'm not trying to be inconsistent in doing this, but rather to show you two different realities, or, pardon the pun, but kind of a tale of two cities here. One where we have a $1.4 million gap, one where we're able to rebound our fund balance up to $16.9 million. And now I do want to be clear, I'm not necessarily saying that we should put all surplus funds directly into fund balance and that they should remain there. I know Melissa recently has discussed with the council that there's some serious debt obligations from a variety of sources. I think these monies could well address some of those. So I wouldn't necessarily leave it there, but I just kind of want to show you the difference between one where we've got a gap, one where we're doing well again the next year, and that's without me adding additional revenues into the out year. So it's just a very different outlook between these two scenarios. Yes, sir.
So just to be clear, I want to make sure you're putting a factor in to the 26-27 preliminary number of additional income, which would allow for building back that reserve.
Correct.
But you're not projecting that out into any future years.
I'm not, just because I think there's so much still up in the air right now that I don't want to create any confusion by putting those numbers into the fund balance. I think to some degree that would be helpful for people to see, but at the same time, I think just showing you the impact of the initial year and what that allows us to do versus if we don't have it, I hope is a good enough illustration for people initially of the kind of night and day difference that we're talking about here. And as we get more confident in numbers and as things progress, if they do progress, I would be happy to give an update to the council on where the fund balance is projected to be with additional revenues.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right, so we've talked about high level, the budget pressures. I do want to get into them a little bit more in depth, and I'll try to go quickly and be respectful of everybody's time. So grants continue to be a source of pressure. Thankfully, the grant landscape is not as volatile as it was this time last year. I think people may recall, I think it was actually this exact week last year that the grants world turned upside down. But unfortunately, some uncertainty does persist. It was just last month, actually, that the Mid-America Regional Council received word that their SAMHSA grants were going away, and then literally the next day they received a letter saying, nope, funding is restored. So still a little more volatile perhaps than we would like, and I think just so everybody understands, we have a variety of departments that receive grant funding. So the police department does, Health and Animal Services, Emergency Preparedness, and Community Development. So any continued uncertainty in the grant landscape affects a variety of our departments.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please proceed.
to speak to the grants, you're absolutely right how this impacts the city ourselves. There has been a lot of flux in the grant community. My wife works for an organization in social work that is 100% grant funded. And as they were chalkboarding or whiteboarding, depending on how old you are, they were looking at to see how, if some of those grants would be reduced, how many folks that are now housed would now be houseless. So that would be thrown onto the city of Independence and all municipalities, so some of that grant funding would be redacted and then put that strain on us. So these grants are very important not only to the city for obvious reasons, but also to different agencies and too that have massive impacts if they're reduced.
I absolutely agree, Councilmember. There's 100% a ripple effect there that would impact us beyond just our own budget. 100%.
That was my squirrel moment.
I am also a squirrel. I appreciate it. So perhaps the biggest pressure for the city is personnel. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is just sort of a statement of fact. Personnel costs, salary and benefits, account for 30% of the city's budget. But I want to be clear, that's 30% of the $424 million budget. When we talk specifically about the general fund budget, we're talking the majority of that budget is personnel costs. So any kind of change there has an outsized impact, good or bad. That's just objectively the case. So when we factor in personnel and we talk about budget pressures, we absolutely have to take a balanced approach to personnel, to compensation specifically. And there's just some different things that we have to weigh here. So we have to consider cost of living, any applicable labor agreements, retention and morale is important. But at the same time, we have to take kind of a bird's eye view level, and we have to look at responsible spending, what a change to personnel, whether positive for our employees or not, would do to service levels, and what our community obligations are in terms of providing services point blank. So personnel, again, just kind of objectively based on the size of our budget, is always a major cost driver, and any change has an impact there.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
you mentioned that in the general fund, it's majority. Can you give me a percentage? Oh, sorry.
No,
Just
it's okay.
to put you on the spot.
I was looking at this earlier, Councilwoman. I knew you would ask me this, and I apologize because I didn't. It's because we moved police and fire out that makes it harder to calculate. But for both of them, personnel is above 50%, and then and I think for PD it was almost 80. I'm looking at the police department. They're like, no.
Okay. Will you get back to me on that?
Yes, it is above 60%. I can tell you that much. The exact, I don't know. They didn't want me to tap them in. That's okay. So a subsidiary of personnel is healthcare, but I think it's worth talking about on its own. You heard me mention earlier with the fund model that we estimate a 10% increase each year, and I'll show you this just because that's pretty accurate. So this compares the Cigna Open Access Plan 2 for the cost for just an employee, and then if you're on the family plan, in 2026 versus 2024. In both of these instances, it's about an 18% increase. So pretty accurate over a 2-year period in terms of a 10% increase and 10% increase. But I show you this to say, like, this is a lot of money, especially when we look at the family plan. So what that would have cost us in 2024, and I'm going to caveat this slightly because technically health insurance rates are blended. So 6 months of the year is the prior year, and then the latter 6. So if it's this year, it's 2026 and then 2027. So it wouldn't quite be this amount, but for illustration purposes, this would have cost us $2.29 million. Today it costs us $2.7. And there's nothing we can do. I mean, there are things that we do, and we do manage healthcare, but by and large, it goes up by 10% each year. And we just try to manage and provide good options that make financial sense. But that just kind of shows you that's a $500-something thousand increase over 2 years without us lifting a finger, really. I'm sorry, is there?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question. The world of healthcare is about to explode in that as the ACA has gotten reduced and there are more people who are now going bare because they can't afford premiums, and at the same time it looks as though Missouri is looking perhaps at 150,000 people coming off of Medicaid rolls, all those expenses are shifted to the commercial side, meaning us. So when you go to the ER, you don't just pay for your own care, you pay a portion for the uninsured care there as well. Is there any estimates for baking that into what we think the 27, 28 plants are going to look like?
Councilmember, you're stealing all my points.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. That is an excellent question, and that's kind of why I put these factors up here for consideration. We don't have an estimate yet. That's something that we would rely on CBIZ to help us navigate, and it's something that's on their radar. They're still working on the 2027 rates at this point, but that's absolutely correct that there will be a trickle-down effect, and typically, when people have to make a choice about getting off of healthcare, it's usually healthier individuals who opt to get off, who are willing to take that risk. That means your health insurance pool is riskier, the costs just funnel. And so even though we have our own healthcare and it's not as direct, yes, we do anticipate a cost increase there, but we would be relying on CBIZ to help us there. So, yes. Which is why also that I make a point to say in that fund balance model that it's based on the 10%, because that could change. We hope that it doesn't, but it could. Additionally, for healthcare, so we have costs for our employees, which this is not comprehensive, it's just an example. But the other side that's a significant budget pressure is the retiree healthcare. And so I think total this year we were looking at about $18 million in healthcare cost. The projected retiree budget for 26-27 is $4.1 million for the pre-65 population, and for the post-65, it's $3.7 million for a total of $7.9 million. So objectively, just another factor there that we have to consider, and that continues to apply pressure, especially when we don't have a revenue offset. Okay. And since we talked earlier about we've had some additional expenditures this year, that's why we're going over budget, I kind of just wanted to give people an example of what some of those things look like. In case some of our residents don't know, unfortunately, we do have damage to city facilities, and it costs money. This photo here on the slide is damage that was done to the IAC where copper wire was ripped out. That's happened multiple times. It's a couple $100,000 a pop each time it happens. That adds up. It prevents us from doing other things. We had to have a primary election this year. That's $300,000. There's personnel changes. When a city manager leaves and they have a payout, that's not something we budgeted for. If he'd have told me earlier, I would have budgeted. He didn't. And then we have, there was, if you all will recall earlier this year, an unexpected increase in the retiree health increase costs. It's $249,000 spread across several departments. That's not just general fund, but there's that. And then other building-related expenditures and personnel changes. So just to kind of give people an example when we're talking about, it's like, why didn't you budget for these things? I want people to understand some of the things that pop up that have a pretty significant impact.
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
can you go back to your unbudgeted, please?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Not that I was going to use anything from there as an example, but also that's unbudgeted as we were going through our Parks Master Plan is the damage that has taken place to our parks. By the massive amount of vandalism, destruction of our shelters, our toilet facilities and stuff like that. Some of those can run into the tens of thousands of dollars on a more routine basis, which is unfortunate because that just detracts from money that they can spend.
Yes. It's very frustrating to me. I feel terrible every time I have conversations with the Parks Department because we're constantly trying to plug things. And I know for a department, that's very difficult morale-wise when your folks are having to go out and repair facilities that they work so hard on. And then we have to make choices about the services we provide because we had to spend $10,000 fixing a restroom facility. So.
One of the expenditures that we came up with was when the car accident took place at the bus stop at Brookside and 24 Highway. That was not budgeted in, and I don't know what the bill was that. I'm sure it was probably $5 to $10 grand to remove all that debris. So, I mean, it's a lot of incidentals throughout the year that adds up.
Yes, there absolutely are. So I'd like to leave you with two things. I have a quick closing, but I'll say this first. Excuse me, sorry. I'm going to be a little bit corny here, but budget is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so I can understand when there's public frustration or there feels like there's not transparency around why, you know, certain things don't get budgeted, why we have to do things. But the budget is a plan, and you're doing it, you know, trying to pace out unexpected costs or issues like the we were just talking about with parks that come up. They're kind of like an unknown hill or a bad leg cramp, like halfway through your marathon. They're really going to set you back. Like, you've got no choice but to course correct somewhere. You're either going to have to slow your pace there and speed it up, or you've got your little energy bites that you have to eat now on mile 10 instead of mile 17. And there's always a trade-off, I think, is what's important for people to understand. And it's either a trade-off that we have to make that budget year, or we hit our fund balance. And then that sets us up for a trade-off in the next budget cycle where we don't get to do some of the things we want to do because maybe we're deciding to increase that fund balance. So just my little corny takeaway, the budget is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and unexpected costs are like a hill. In closing, I just would like to remind members of the public who are listening tonight that we do have a budget community survey that is live. I have put a link that is probably not useful to you, but if you Google City of Independence budget, and then there's a little subset page, and I know that the social media team has shared it as well, so you can find it there. We really do value your input on this budget survey. Last year, we used the responses and kind of synthesized them to let council know what people had said was important. It factored into decision making. So strongly encourage people to take that if you want to have a voice in the budget process. There are other opportunities as well, but this is a great one to give some impact, and I would love to see what people have to say. So that is all that I have. If you have any further questions, take them now.
Anyone else have other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
I don't have a question, but I do. These meetings are so important, and this presentation was really done well, and it's helpful to explain to people what we do, what we go through, why we don't sleep, that kind of thing. And Melissa, your presentation recently was so good, and you guys have taught me so much in the last years, and so I'm really thankful that you guys are here.
Thank you.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is, if you like this, if this is your interest, we do this at the audit and finance meetings every quarter, and we go through, you know, expense versus what we have, you know, everything that we've spent, everything we have left over. We go through that monthly in our audit and finance, and we're also going to learn about the audit on Wednesday. And that is kind of the big meeting for our committee every year, where the outside agency that has been auditing us comes to us and tells us what they found. And it's just a really important part of what we do. And I wish more people were watching those meetings and watching meetings like this, because it's sort of where the meat and potatoes are. That's all.
Very good. Please proceed.
Thank you. I have to just commend your team. Not only do you make presentations like this and babysit the funds to keep everything on the straight and narrow, but you do all kinds of scenario modeling, financial modeling, predictive modeling, so that we can see if we make change X, what does that do to Y? And you know, our job is not just to balance a budget this year, but not encumber the next several city councils with budgets that they're going to have to make difficult decisions. So the skills and talent that you bring to help us make our decisions, I just don't have enough appreciation for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
The other thing I just might mention is that, and one of the things that's way behind the scenes that no one really sees, is that you guys keep track of, as the year goes along, approving things that are in the budget, so that we don't get too far out of, out of budget, out of line in what we're doing. So that's really an important piece of the puzzle that the budget office does, to kind of make sure that we don't stray from the budget that's approved when when it's approved in usually in June every year. So that's just another added thing that is done.
Anyone else? No, I just want to thank you to, oh,
Mr. Mayor.
fire away, John.
Thank you. Alex, thank you for the presentation. It does dovetail nicely with what we've been discussing tonight, the presentation Melissa gave a couple weeks ago. So one of the challenges for us as a city council is, and city staff, is to take a look at how we increase these sales tax. When I was on the council the first time, the franchise tax was beginning to take a serious hit, mainly because, guess what, nobody had a landline anymore. So those funds were being reduced. It's the changing of the economy throughout the years from brick and mortar to more online sales and everything in between. So the conundrum for us as a city council and us as district individuals to work within our district is to, one, promote the greenfield development where appropriate, but also for like Councilwoman Vaught and myself who are on the west side of town, how do we revitalize those areas, those economic nodes? So it's important as we work with that, we use all the tools in our toolbox, which is our Chamber of Commerce friends with our economic partnership and all the developmental friends that we have. I was talking to our deputy city manager today. We're going to get on the books to talk to some individuals that may be wanting to help us grow in Western Independence and Fairmont specifically. So those are a lot of the challenges that we have, is try to promote those areas. When development does take place, you had an undesignated or unfunded for the demo of City Hall. Although that has been unfunded, but the long-term gains, if we have a good agreement with the Mid-Continent Public Library, will pay dividends into the years ahead of us with a $50 million development, almost 200 employees coming here. And also in the near future, there should be a rollout of a conversation of hotel here on the square. So economic development's taking place on the west side with Inglewood, the Friends of Inglewood Theater, purchasing the theater. That's just one more step in the right direction for Western Independence. Inglewood Arts has brought economic activity there. So that's the challenge that us as a city council have. How do we bring that back alive so we can fill our tax coffers? So that's my soapbox. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Anyone else? Still room for soapbox. You can hop on. Very good.
It's a big one.
It is. We've got room. But I just want to thank, Melissa Cabrera as our finance director and Alex Morgan. You do a great job with the budget. You always make as difficult it is to make a finance presentation interesting, you always do. And you make it very clear and interesting. And I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you do, because I know it just goes into hours and hours and hours of work to get to this point. And you also have the pressure from us to keep it under 30 to 40 minutes. You've heard that many times, and you did a great job doing that. So hitting both those targets is well done and very much appreciated. And so I just want to say thank you very much on behalf of all of our colleagues here. And thank you for the great job that you both do. So thank you very much. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We love a captive audience to talk about finance. I'll take it anytime. Thank you.
That is a livelihood of a finance professional. Wow, I've got people here and they're not going to leave. That is great. It's almost like a jail sentence. We've got the police here. We could do that, right? Couldn't we, Chief? Take care of that. All right. Next item on the agenda, we've talked about the historic sites. We've got Mr. City Clerk. We have some business to do with regards to boards and commissions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one memorandum from the City Clerk's office regarding the Public Utilities Advisory Board. A recommendation has been made to appoint Ted Lucy to the Public Utilities Advisory Board. I apologize if I mispronounced that name. Staff requests direction to add a resolution to the next regular meeting appointing this individual to the above board.
Thank you very much. And that's all? Very good. Anyone else? Other items before we call this meeting adjourned? Nothing else? Call the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.